Hey guys, welcome to today's episode. And we have Greg Hammer, MD, and he's a wellness and mindful author. And we are going to talk today about chronic stress, what to do about it, how to get rid of it, and how to become more resilient. So, Greg, welcome.
Great to be with you.
So, one of the things that is so important that I think is that a lot of people, they are doing everything right. And I would say this is including me. They're, eating organic, they're doing red light therapy and cryotherapy and sauna and all the things, right? And they're checking it off and they still are very sick. They have autoimmune disease, gut issues, this, that, and the other. And part of it has to do with their ability to be able to handle stress. And so, I think that what happens is that if you had to label it, of like, all right, what's number one? Being able to handle stress probably might be number one on that list, because if you're doing all the other things, but you haven't fixed that stress piece, that's a problem. Talk about that.
Sure. Well, first of all, we can talk about physical well-being and mental and spiritual well-being. And of course, they're very much interconnected. But, I think the pillars of physical well-being include sleep, which is increasingly being recognized as a very active process where our brain is doing lots of things. And we could talk about that. And sleep is something that almost all of us don't get enough of. And we can talk about what sleep hygiene is and the importance of sleep and what the physiology of sleep is. The next ingredient to physical well-being is exercise, of course, and that has a number of different components: resistance training, cardio training, core training, balance training, because falls are one of the major causes of morbidity and even mortality in people as we age. And the third component besides sleep and exercise is nutrition, which you mentioned. Everybody, out there who's eating well and buying organic food and so on, yet is still sick, that's not terribly surprising, because the other half of wellness is really mental and spiritual wellness, and there's a remedy for that too. But a common thread in illness is chronic stress, as you mentioned. And so what is chronic stress and why do we have it and what can we do about it? So I think first, if we're going to talk about stress, we should talk about the acute stress response, because it precedes chronic stress. In other words, we experience acute stress. We don't have the resilience to neutralize the physiology of the acute stress response. And therefore, a lot of those physiologic changes become chronic. And they make us sick, and they actually age us. So, we all want to live a long, healthy life as long as we're happy. So it starts with stress. So acute stress is really a series of physiologic responses that have evolved over hundreds of thousands of years and evolved for a reason, because, if you go back 150,000 years, you can picture us, early Homo sapiens sitting in a cave, taking care of our family, trying to keep a fire going. And they were well served by imagining there might be a saber-toothed tiger lurking outside the mouth of the cave, because there might have been. And if they were wary and sort of thinking in a rather negative, catastrophizing way and experiencing some degree of stress, they may have lived longer. So, those early Homo sapiens who lived longer tended to have more offspring. And so the genes that code for that negative, wary, somewhat stressed physiology spread in the population. And fast forward, here we are today, and we're stuck with those genes. We're stuck with those physiologic responses to acute stress, but we don't commonly have an actual threat. Nowadays, mostly the acute stress response is triggered by our thoughts. And since we have this negativity bias hardwired into our brains, our thoughts may often be negative and invoke a lot of fear and anxiety and shame and regret and the acute stress response. So, happy to take that in whatever direction you'd like. We can drill down more on the acute stress response, talk about how we can neutralize it to prevent chronic stress, and what the physiology of chronic stress is and why it's so damaging to us.
I don't know about you guys, but I am stressed. And if you're feeling overwhelmed this holiday season, then I get it. With all the family get togethers, it is just a relentless source of stress. But anyway, there is something that I've got called Stress Guardian, and it's actually made by Bioptimizers, the people who make the magnesium breakthrough, which I love, love, love. But anyway, they are literally made this new product. It has 14 adaptogenic herbs, and it just regulates your stress. I just actually took some right this second, and it's awesome. If you go to stressguardian.com/wasteaway and put in waste away for 10% off your first order, it's stressguardian.com/wasteaway. Go there now. Yeah. And I love how you put that, because I agree, acute stress is short term, chronic stress is long term. And so acute stress would be anything that you suffer for a short period of time, like an argument with your spouse or criticism from your boss. But if you have chronic stress and it's just chronic, you hate your job, or you have a marriage that's not doing well and it's just constantly fighting, and it's chronic stress, our body is good at handling episodes of acute stress. We were designed to recover quickly from short-term stress, but the body is really not good at handling chronic stress. And so I love that that's what we're talking about today, because I think it just helps people to understand we're not getting rid of stress. Like, that's not possible. It doesn't matter who you are, what human you are. You're going to have acute stress, and that's fine. Your body is able to handle that and be able to recover quickly from that short-term stress. It's the chronic stress that is not good, and that's what can hold a lot of health problems like high blood pressure, heart disease, chronic pain, autoimmune, depression, all of that. So now that we've kind of defined that, let's actually talk strictly about chronic stress right now and discuss what are some of the techniques that you need to improve your coping skills, some real practical things that you need to do, and some of the self-talk that you need to do to be able to get rid of that chronic stress in your life.
Sure. Well, just to kind of close the loop, the acute stress response includes an elevation of adrenaline in our body, what we call in medicine epinephrine, but an elevation of adrenaline, cortisol. And those two hormones actually are adaptive when we're faced with an acute threat, because the epinephrine increases the amount of blood our heart is pumping to our muscles, and the cortisol and epinephrine both increase the amount of sugar in our blood. So as a result of the epinephrine and cortisol elevations, we're pumping more substrate or glucose to our muscles, and that helps us either run or stay and fight if necessary. And that's fine to have an acute stress response, even if it's just to our thoughts, even if it's not really adaptive, as long as we can neutralize those responses. So when we feel that we're getting flooded with epinephrine, adrenaline, and we can imagine that our heart rate is going up, our blood pressure is going up, our blood sugar is going up, that's okay. Like you said, we may be having an argument, or we may be anxious about meeting with our boss, or whatever is triggering that, as long as we can neutralize those responses. So, the way our brains work is there's neural or nerve-related patterns in our brain, networks, and the more we think those thoughts and experience those sensations, the more we embed these pathways, the more we render those pathways longer lasting. And so we're now hardwired in ways that promote chronic stress, that minimize our ability to neutralize the acute stress response and allow those changes to become chronic or longer lasting. So the first thing to do is sort of recognize when we're stressed, have that light bulb moment, and have a plan as to what to do about it. So we're getting flooded in an argument Take a breath, try to be less reactive, allow that adrenaline to come down a little bit, and then invoke thoughts and ways of being that will become strengthened over time the more you think them and the way you enact them, that will neutralize the acute stress response and prevent that elevation in adrenaline and cortisol and other hormonal changes from becoming chronic. So how can we do that? So I think we go now to the mental and spiritual well-being side, and that's how we deal with this acute stress response and mitigate or prevent chronic stress. So my first book is called Gain Without Pain. The GAIN is in capital letters. It's an acronym for gratitude, acceptance, intention, non-judgment. It's a mindfulness-based practice. So we get up in the morning, we open the blinds, we do our morning hygiene thing, we find a comfortable place to sit, close our eyes, we begin to focus on the breath, because slow, deep, deliberate breathing activates the parasympathetic nervous system. And so it's really doing the opposite of the acute stress response. It's lowering the epinephrine or adrenaline in our body, lowering our heart rate, lowering our blood pressure, our blood sugar, and our cortisol levels, and bringing us back into homeostasis. So deep breathing is a really important tool. So we focus on our breath, maybe slowing the in-breath through our nose to a count of 3, pausing to a count of 3, and then slowly exhaling to a count of 4. And then we go through a self-guided tour of these elements of gain, of that for which we're grateful, accepting things that are uncomfortable or painful that we can't change. The I in gain is intention, sort of fortifying our purposefulness or plan to be more present and positive. And the N is non-judgment. We can learn how to drop the judgments, which, again, because of our negativity bias, are often very negative, particularly our self-judgments. We're very harshly judgmental of ourselves. And then we return our focus to the breath, slow, deep breathing, and slowly open our eyes. And that can take 3 or 4 minutes. And what we're doing is we're establishing and reinforcing these neural pathways in our brain that slow our heart rate, lower our blood pressure, bring us back into homeostasis physiologically, and reinforce these 4 fundamentals of happiness, which are gratitude, acceptance, intention, non-judgment. So that's an example of a mindfulness-based practice that we can invoke at any time that we feel that acute stress response. And the more we practice this response to acute stress, the better and better we get at it. And the more immediately we can neutralize these hormonal and other changes when they are not adaptive. And I think this is really the key to preventing and mitigating chronic stress.
Guys, I just want to interrupt for just a second, and I want you to hear Paul Saladino talk about why liver is so important. And if you don't like liver, we have another option for you.
Your ancestors were eating liver. And the reason that this sort of wisdom has been passed down is because liver is very nutritious. It's basically nature's multivitamin. If you look at the nutrients in meat, they're great. You've got zinc, you got B6, you got B12, you got some K2. But if you look at liver, it really complements what's in muscle meat. And there are many unique nutrients found in organs, specifically liver as a powerhouse of these, that are difficult to obtain outside of liver. Like meat and organs are like peanut butter and jelly. They just go together. They're supposed to be eaten together. The easiest way to eat liver is just to do it raw. If you don't want to eat liver raw, you can cook it. But the reason that I like to do it raw is because there are unique nutrients in liver that are probably somewhat degraded when you cook the liver.
This really is like the most nutrient-rich supplements that you can find, and they are amazing. I have tried them. I absolutely love them. So just go to heartandsoil.co, use the coupon code Chantel Ray, and save you some money there. One of the things that I want you to talk about a little bit more is exactly how to do the breathing. So it's funny, probably about 2 months ago, I went to go get a massage. It was at this place called the Edgar Cayce Foundation down at the oceanfront. And I got the massage, and the guy says to me, he said, "Miss Ray, don't take this the wrong way." But he said, "You breathe like a scared squirrel." He's like, "Your breathing is terrible." And so I started looking at something and I found something called box breathing, which I never heard about before. And basically, it's supposed to be like this simple relaxation technique where it just helps you to relax the body and remove stress. And one of the things that box breathing says is that there's 4 basic steps. Step 1 is breathing in and holding that when you breathe in, or step 1 is breathing in. Step 2 is holding the breath. Step 3 is breathing out and then holding that breath. So you had mentioned something that you were talking about. I think you said 3 breaths in and 4 breaths out. So I just think breathing is really underrated, and I don't know how to do it. I don't breathe. Clearly, I'm like the scared squirrel. So I want you to kind of expand on that and kind of show an example and what exactly that is.
Sure. Well, first of all, we're all aware to some degree of how we react to stress and how we hold tension in our bodies. So a lot of people, may get a massage and the massage therapist will be massaging their shoulders and their neck and say, boy, you are really tight here. We all hold tension in certain areas in our body, and the shoulders and neck are very common, but so is the chest wall and the diaphragm. So you talk about breathing like a squirrel. So if we hold a lot of tension in our chest, we're not really breathing deeply. And I think we can go for a whole day without really taking a very deep breath, because when we're having that tension and it is manifest in our chest wall and our diaphragm, this is opposing deep breathing. And so we're breathing shallow and making up for that, or trying to compensate by breathing relatively rapidly. Of course, this is just a sort of a brainstem mediated way of breathing unconsciously, if you will. But we're capable of breathing consciously, and we're capable of mindfully relaxing the muscles in our chest and our diaphragm. So when we take slow, deep breaths, that's exactly what we're doing. Because if you're going to take a deep breath, you have to relax your chest wall muscles, and your diaphragm contracts when you're taking the in-breath, but then you have to make it relaxed when you're breathing out. So what we do in the gain practice is, as I said, we find a comfortable place to sit, we close our eyes, and then if we focus on the in-breath and do it through our nose to a count of 3, and let's say that each count is about 1 second. So we're taking a slow 3-second breath through our nose, then we're expanding our chest fully, and then gently holding that breath for another count of 3, and then exhaling slowly through the nose or mouth to a count of 4 before we take the next in-breath. So it's box breathing would be, into a count of 3, pause to a count of 3, out to a count of 3, and don't breathe in for a count of 3. I sort of incorporate that last part in the out breath. So slowly in through the nose to a count of 3, gently holding that breath with our chest fully expanded to a count of 3, and then just very gently, without effort, relaxing and letting the breath go in a controlled way to a count of 4, and then we initiate the next breath. And if each count is a second, we have 3 in, 3 holding, and 4 out. That's 10 seconds. So the breathing cycle is 10 seconds, and so we're breathing 6 times a minute, whereas we might normally be breathing double that. So this slow, deep breathing has a physiologic correlate. It actually activates the vagus nerve, which has had some attention in sort of the biohacking health circles of late, activates the vagus nerve and parasympathetic nervous system. And this fight or flight response we talked about with acute stress is a manifestation of activation of the sympathetic nervous system. That's the fight or flight side. The vagus nerve and parasympathetic system that's activated by this slow, deep breathing is the opposite. It's the parasympathetic nervous system that keeps our sympathetic nervous system in check. So this is a very healthy thing to do in and of itself.
So good. Tell us some of the daily habits that you do to make sure your health is really on top of its game, and some of your biohacks that you do personally and suggest other people to do.
Well, as I said, I start my day with a gain meditation because, again, this is establishing and reinforcing very mentally and spiritually healthy ways of thinking and being. So starting with the slow, deep breathing, and then a contemplation as I focus on the breath as well of that for which I'm grateful, which, I can go down the list. I'm grateful for this day. I did my meditation this morning, and there's birds chirping, and it's very quiet otherwise. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful for my health. I'm grateful for the love of my dogs, my daughter, my friends, my community. We all have much for which to be grateful here, especially given what's going on with so many other people around the world. We're very, very fortunate to live where we do and have much for which to be grateful. Then I transition to the A in GAIN, which is acceptance. So I actually take a uncomfortable or painful thought or experience, and I bring it closer to my body, again, while I'm doing the deep breathing with my eyes closed, and bring it into my heart. So I lost my son at the age of 29, 8 years ago, and that comes to me easily. And I bring this experience into my heart, and I actually hold it in my heart and nourish it with my heart as I do this slow, deep breathing. And I relax my body into this experience, and so I'm accepting it. So just as a serenity prayer would have it, I can't change it, and so I'm well served by accepting it. And so I do this with the slow, deep breathing and have this experience in my heart. I transition to intention, and our brains are wired to be very distracted. If you close your eyes and try to think of your present experience, you're probably going to go to something that you have to do later today, or something you said or did yesterday that you wish you hadn't said or done. And it's hard to be present. So in the I in GAIN, we focus on our current experience, just the pressure of the chair against our body, the sound of the birds chirping, or maybe an airplane going by or a car in the distance. We spend 30 seconds just really focusing on our present experience. And then we move to the N in GAIN, which is non-judgment. And again, by having these thoughts on a daily basis, with our deep breathing, we're actually reinforcing these neural pathways and training our brains to have more thoughts of gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non-judgment. So in the non-judgment 30 or 45 seconds, we may picture an image of the Earth apparently suspended in space, one of these beautiful NASA images. And the Earth is a beautiful planet, but it really does not have the qualities of good or bad. There is no good or bad. The Earth is just a planet that it is. And so it's only logical for me to think that I too am just the person I am. I'm neither good nor bad. And I incorporate this in my deep breathing. I'm just a person. I'm neither good nor bad. I simply am. I am. And we hold this I amness with the breath. And then we return our focus strictly to the breath. And then we open our eyes slowly and we're ready to go out in the world. And what happens is with this practice is that whenever we begin to experience acute stress and we start to judge, for example, a driver kind of cuts us off and we start to make all these judgments about the driver, a light bulb goes off and reminds us we just did our GAIN meditation, we're practicing non-judgment, just let the judgment go. And we actually get a little laugh to ourselves, a little dopamine hit instead of an extra adrenaline hit. And so again, the more we do this practice, the more it changes the way we think and the way we experience life. And we're able to cope with acute stress, and to the extent it sneaks into the realm of being chronic, we can deal with it. And so I really think a daily practice, whether we call it a mindfulness-based practice or otherwise, is just absolutely essential to finding balance and homeostasis in our mental and spiritual ways of being.
So what are some of the things, like, do you have any things that you say, okay, every single day or every single week, I make sure I do A, B, C, and D? What would those things be?
Well, I actually bring it more into focus and what am I going to do today, right? Because our goals are in the distance, our intentions are right now. So what am I going to do right now? Well, I'm going to do my GAIN practice. I'm going to think about gratitude whenever I start to sort of feel badly about my circumstances. I'm going to go to my acceptance practice when I realize I'm resisting something and and enhancing my suffering rather than diminishing it. I'm going to be intentional. When I find that I'm having negative thoughts, I'm going to go back to my intention for staying present and positive. And when I'm judging, I go to non-judgment and drop the judgment. So that's something that I practice every day. And when I find that I'm getting stressed, I go back to that practice. But I'm also very cognizant of my physical well-being. And so I try to focus on my sleep hygiene when it comes to things that affect my sleep. I exercise almost every day, intentionally sort of rotating resistance training, cardio training, core and balance training. And with regard to nutrition, I'm very conscious of what I'm eating and have purposefulness or intention with regard to my diet. And that goes for supplements as well. So I really think it's, rather than what am I going to do this week or this month or this year, what am I going to do right now and what am I going to do today? And so I focus on the mental and spiritual and focus on the elements of physical well-being in addition.
I love that. I love that. That's so good. Well, this has been amazing. Tell listeners where they can find you and where they can follow you.
My website is greghammermd.com, greghammermd.com. There's a link to my first book and lots of other information, including media, and I assume that our discussion will be on there in the next couple of weeks as well. So greghammermd.com.
Awesome. Well, this has been great. You guys stay tuned. We've got another episode coming up in just a few. Bye-bye for now.